Happy Wednesday, everyone. The council agenda was a little light last week, so we skipped the video, but today we have a lot to talk about. How are you doing, Matt?
Doing okay. That was a very full meeting. We talked about a lot yesterday.
Yeah, I think the two big things were Breeze of Innovation, which got a lot of public comment, and you guys got a lot of COVID updates. So let's start with the COVID stuff.
Sure. Yeah, and we had a few different items on this, one of which I won't dwell on, but we were basically approving the accounting of the stimulus funds that we spent over the past year or so. So that's money from the federal and state government, and we have to carefully account for where it went to ensure that we get the proper reimbursement. So that was a big item. But the one that was most interesting was looking forward on the city's roadmap. So we have our baseline operation, our baseline service delivery as a city, and then we have a roadmap for what you might call new investments or change initiatives, where we're trying to improve upon or enhance that baseline level of service delivery. So I'm going to actually share my screen, and I'll just share it for a few minutes here. So this is the roadmap I'm referring to for new projects, change initiatives, things that we're trying to add to or improve upon beyond the basic core operation of the standard city services. And as you can see in the upper right, they're organized, upper left, you can see the enterprise priorities. And yesterday we talked about that first row, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, our community and economic recovery, which is timely for a whole bunch of reasons. We are starting to move from the response to the public health crisis into the recovery, which is much more about helping people recover economically. We have so many challenges, from unemployment to back rent and huge debts people have accumulated, to schools not being fully open in some cases, and people needing support with childcare. I actually think childcare is a really interesting one. All of us who are parents and have been working from home with our kids over the past year, I think it's just given an appreciation for just how hard it is to juggle being a parent and also being a good employee or employer. And so that's something the city has delved into a little bit. So let me just quickly say a few things on these. The first box there is housing stabilization. And one thing I should note is these projects are in the recovery line item here. All of these projects are basically funded by the American Recovery Act. So this is a one-time fiscal stimulus that we can apply. Not that we don't do anything in these areas, but these are a little outside of our core service delivery, and they're things that we ramped up during the pandemic and want to continue to do in our next fiscal year as long as funds are available. So people should not see these as detracting from police response or park maintenance. This is using federal dollars primarily and some state dollars to address some of the greatest recovery needs that we have. So these are restricted funds. So on housing stabilization, a lot of the work there is around the rental assistance for people who have accumulated months worth of back rent. We have a bunch of dollars we need to deploy there to wind down those debts for both renters and property owners who rent to those renters. We need to transition. We have some shelter space that ramped up during the pandemic that needs to ramp down, but we don't want to push more people onto our streets. And so we need to do a thoughtful, careful transition of our shelter capacity and make sure we keep our utilization rates up. And of course, we want to prevent evictions. One of the most important things we can do is wind down all that debt, help people get back on their feet, and ensure that as we come out of the crisis and eventually remove the eviction moratorium, that we don't end up with thousands of people losing their homes overnight. So that's very, very important. Workforce development, the city is looking at ways, and a lot of these are going to come back to us with more detail in the months ahead, but looking at supporting small businesses. We've lost, well, about 40% of our small businesses have closed. I think
that was stark when I saw that slide.
Wasn't that scary? Yeah, and as Nancy Klein, who's the director of the Office of Economic Development, mentioned, we don't know how many of those are permanently closed versus coming back. So could be that I
worked at a small business before the pandemic. I was working at a very small law firm. It was 2 attorneys and then 3 of us were assistants, and they had to furlough 2 of us. I ended up being indefinitely and wound up working for you. So even in that 60% that opened, they're probably not doing so hot either, or that stayed open. They're probably not doing so great either.
Absolutely. And in fact, the majority of the hit to our sales tax revenue came from that job, reduced capacity and just total shutdown for a number of small businesses. So you're absolutely right. I think our small businesses pulled way back. Some of them closed their doors temporarily, in many cases permanently. There's a lot we don't know there, but we want to encourage businesses to come back, to be founded, to reopen, to expand. And we need to be focused on industries that are high growth and high wage. We want to do our best to encourage good, high paying jobs. And so one thing that was just highlighted yesterday was the value of advanced manufacturing. We still do manufacturing in San Jose. It is not all overseas. And they tend to be high paying jobs, relatively speaking, much higher than many of our sort of entry level retail jobs. For example, you're often making 2 or 3 times that in advanced manufacturing, and there's a real need there. So anyway, a lot more to be said there, but workforce development and job growth. And then, and I mentioned small business recovery, so we kind of talked about those two together. Food and necessities distribution, as people know, the city's efforts on this front were absolutely heroic through the pandemic, and the county charged the city with managing food distribution during the pandemic. We ramped up to delivering a few million meals per week, and there's still ongoing need. We are finally, it sounds like we are turning the corner on demand for food, which is great. As people get jobs and their income comes back, they are not going to want to come stand in line at a food bank. So great to see that the demand is starting to decline. Still a lot of need. That's not done yet. Digital inclusion, we are working to expand access to broadband. I think another thing, just like childcare, another thing that the pandemic really proved is if you don't have access to high bandwidth internet, your opportunities are significantly reduced. And so we've got partnerships with school districts on the east side and across the city in libraries and our community centers. We're doing our best to expand broadband access, and the city has a plan with federal funding, thankfully, to add access for literally, when all is said and done, we from the beginning of the pandemic to where we plan to be in a couple of years, we will have added about 300,000 people in terms of access to broadband. So that's huge.
Excellent.
Yeah, really important. I mean, obviously, we couldn't record this or do most of our jobs, Liz, if we didn't have access, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then I mentioned childcare, and frankly, this is not a core service of the city, but for people for whom we can help with the physical space we have libraries and community centers, we have space, and we're operating a relatively small program, but at any given time, we are helping hundreds of families right now kind of navigate the world that we're in. And I think there's a larger conversation as a country we need to have about access to childcare. I'm not sure the city's going to solve that, but as long as there are dollars available that can't be used for anything else, I think it's not a bad place for us to get some experience and help the families we can help. So that was really what we covered yesterday. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Right. And anything else on COVID you think we should mention?
No, when you hit that 40% statistic, like that was the thing that even today kind of stuck with me. So I think we can move on to the other big item you guys talked about yesterday. We got a lot of emails that I will be answering in the next few days. And there was a lot of public comment about Breeze of Innovation. And ultimately council voted unanimously for it. So Matt, I'm sure everybody's wondering, why did you vote for this? And what did you vote for? Because I do think there was a little bit of confusion about what the vote yesterday was about.
Yeah. Well, let's back up, because I'm not sure everyone knows what Breeze of Innovation is or any of this. I think, the backstory here is that there's a private group in San Jose that is that put together a competition for a public art installation on a public park downtown. Arena Green, right next to the SAP Center. And so their proposal has been that they are raising funds to ultimately put an iconic landmark in downtown San Jose, and another reason to put downtown San Jose on the map and attract visitors, something interesting to go see and experience. And they've been going through their process. What came before council yesterday, and this is, I don't know, maybe the second, third, fourth step in a long process, is the winner that their panel of experts selected out of hundreds of submissions. So it was an international competition. They whittled it down and ultimately chose a design called Breeze of Innovation. And I don't know if I have it handy. I was thinking we could actually show people the design.
You keep talking and I will bring it up.
All right, you can share it. Great. So council agreed to move forward, and not without controversy. I want to be really clear with folks. There are a lot of public comment. I had a lot of outreach beforehand. And Liz, you've been running point on this for our team and managing constituent and stakeholder relationships. So there you go. There's a couple views of it. And so those are metal rods that will have, the proposal at least is they'll have a lot of little lights. There's a platform up there where people will be able to walk up inside the structure and stand up top level. And those rods actually bend in the wind. And I believe the idea is that the movement of the rods in the wind actually generates clean energy. And I don't think it's a big amount of energy, but it's just kind of it's a demonstration.
Yeah.
project.
It's symbolic. I think even the brief said like it's not enough to like power a ton of things necessarily, but you know.
Yeah, and it's big. I mean, those are about 200 feet tall, I believe. So,
Yeah.
This would be a large. It would be iconic. You know, personally, well, let me explain what we voted on yesterday, and then I'll share a few other thoughts. So what we voted on was to allow it to basically approve the winning design for further study. So now they have to do an environmental impact review and understand the potential environmental impacts, which there are real concerns about. And they need to come back in 120 days with a proposed timeline with a set of milestones for further design work and fundraising and development and all the stages that this project would need to go through. So we unanimously voted to move it to the next stage and to get the environmental impact report done. My main priorities here. So first, let me say, I think the reason to like this is San Jose, I think, especially in our downtown, as we make long-term investments in building a vibrant, diverse, mixed-use downtown that is a downtown for everyone and really a downtown for Silicon Valley, will benefit from having iconic landmarks and public art and just, you know, unique cultural elements that put it on the map and that make people want to visit. And I think downtown has not had enough of those. And this is, you know, you go to any other city, whether it's San Francisco,
they have the lights on the Bay Bridge.
Yeah, they have the Bay Lights Project, or certainly, you know, DC is just full of landmarks. New York, there's sites, there are places to go see. And San Jose, I think in the long run will benefit from having places to go see. So I think there's a lot of potential benefit here. The concerns and the two main priorities that I have and will be looking for very closely as we go to the next stage are taxpayer dollars and environmental impact. And on the taxpayer dollars front, this is a private gift. And I think it has real benefit for the city, and the city should fully explore it and facilitate if it is going to move forward. But the lion's share of the cost really needs to be borne privately.
Absolutely.
Not to say that there would be zero public cost in terms of staff time, but the staff is estimated this could take over 1,000 hours of staff time. That should not detract from other important work. So that's going to need to be funded privately. So one of the requirements will be, and I think the expectation now is that this private group is going to have to raise $100 million+ to do this. And part of that money is going to have staff time today so that this does not divert taxpayer dollars toward what is really a private initiative, though it's ultimately meant to be a gift to the public. And the public will own it, just to be clear, it's in a public park. It would be owned by the public. I also think it's important that they fundraise for an endowment to maintain ongoing operations, because as we know, it's one thing to build things like roads and parks. It's quite another to pay for their maintenance. So that's important. On the environmental front, you know, and I've spoken to some folks who are very knowledgeable in this area. There are genuine concerns that light is not good for the birds. Birds are attracted to light. That is right. It's right next to a river. So, you know, there are concerns. I think the question is, what's the balance? Are there ways to mitigate and reduce the impact? This is, I would say, to put things in perspective, this is a along a relatively short stretch of the river in the core of the downtown. This is that portion of the river there is meant to be really the center of the downtown as Google goes in and we continue to see growth. And I don't think it's a crazy idea that the center of the largest city in the Bay Area would be bustling and have a lot of tall buildings and a lot of light. So we just need to figure out how to mitigate and what the right balance is. I do have concerns about a lot of light and private billboards and all the rest going in along the whole stretch of the river. I think that would be a really bad idea. So I think, we got to keep things in perspective, but we'll see what the EIR says. We'll see what potential mitigation there can be. We'll see if the group can fundraise $100 million plus. There's still a long way to go, but that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, I think that note about, I definitely saw in a couple letters, there's no there in San Jose, which hurts because like I'm San Jose born and raised, but there's some truth to that. But I think the real important vote's going to be in 120 days when they come back with that environmental impact report. And that's going to tell the real story. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that turns out.
Yeah, me too. I think that'll be really interesting and we'll be sure to keep everybody updated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all for this week. If you enjoy recaps like this, let us know and we'll be back next week because I started peeking ahead at next week's agenda and it's another big one, I think.
It is a lot going on.
All right.
Awesome.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Liz. You
Bye.
too. Take care. Bye, everyone.